Hello, you are listening to Dr. Sushma Singh. Today in Unit 2, Change, Modernization and Development, we are going to start our lecture on the topic Critics of Modernization Theories. In analyzing the assets of the modernization theories, it should be understood that this school of thought emerged in the early years of 1950s and began to disappear in 1970s when belief in it started to wane. In the light of this, it could be presupposed that the weaknesses of modernization theories outnumber its strengths, otherwise, the theories would still be relevant today. Let us discuss the strengths of modernization. The main quality of modernization theory is its simplicity. The objective is already visible in the image of the West, and the path to follow is laid out by the history of Western evolution. All that remains is for the traditional society to recognize what is needed, from examination of other takeoffs to modernity, for their own culture to evolve. Having already achieved their goal, the modern societies can assist in the evolution of the traditional society, although in reality there is far from the truth. By reference to their own history, and so essentially modernization becomes a form of mimicking, a case of what works for them should work for us. The same concept was already covered in the term westernization, effectively referring to the mimicking of the West. But the word modernization has far less geocentric connotations and as a result gains much more affection from developing societies who are keen to retain some sense of their own history. Now let us discuss the weaknesses. However, the strengths of the modernization theory also lead to its weaknesses. A few of them are presented below. The first is the straightforward approach of advancing a society by way of itself evolving internally is, though easy to grasp and as such having strong exterior appeal, far too basic to incorporate into the world system we see today. The very fact that there are modernized societies to look up to entails that a communication and possible cooperation between North and South already exists, and that there are therefore links and ties already in place, not necessarily to the extent that dependency theories would go, arguing that the South cannot grow without the severing of the North's stranglehold, but nonetheless significant ties in the organization of society, which mean that the target society cannot be solely regarded as an internal entity. There is little hope of avoiding international factors in today's global village. To resolve this, some thinkers have developed the theory of diffusionism, which bears many of the characteristics of modernization, but accepts the diffusion of ideas, products, and workforce between both modernized and traditional societies. A culture can be changed subconsciously and indeed overnight in ways that may not be intended or in accordance with planned evolution. Modernization may be revolutionary in that it replaces the traditional with the modern, but it must also be considered that revolutions can take some time. They are not an instantaneous event. The second is another criticism put forward is that while the developing countries struggle to update its social, political, and economic structures to those of the developed countries, it is extremely likely that the modernized countries will continue to grow at the same or possibly faster rate that the developing countries will find if difficult to catch up. Though global evolutionary equality is not a particular goal of the modernization theory, it is surely one of the aims of development as a whole and something that is worth pursuing. If this closing of the gap cannot be easily achieved by the performance of an established theory, such as seems to be the case with modernization, then it is clearly not a comprehensive cure for the problem of development. Third, it is also argued that since the modernization theory is typically a Western phenomena, its roots obviously must lie around capitalist society. The developing world is to be a mirror image of the civilized world, which generally embraces capitalism. For example, it is automatically assumed by the thinkers like Rostow that this is the correct way for an underdeveloped society to develop without considering the implications or alternatives. Fourth, Rostow has been criticized by many on the basis of the teleological approach. Teleological approach is one where the purpose, which is not explicitly intended by anyone, is fulfilled while the process of fulfillment is presented as an inevitable sequence of events. In Rostow's model, policies are the result of development, not vice versa. And this is unacceptable to many, as the policies of the state should be chosen and not just merely adopted. It is felt by many scholars that characteristics of the stages identified by the Rostow might overlap or spill into the other stages. For example, the preconditions stage things may continue in the takeoff stage and could also get carried further beyond this stage. Critics feel that the Rostow plays down all the obstacles and never discusses them. Therefore, it is felt by many that his approach is conceptually vague and empirically superficial. In the takeoff stage, it is felt that merely a shift from agriculture to other sector is not enough. For example, while Denmark, Canada, and France attained this shift, in other countries like Russia, Sweden, Germany, etc., it did not take place to the extent conceived by Rostow. Similarly, it has also been pointed out by experts that Rostow failed to take into consideration other aspects like the bumps, crash landings, and the nocivity crashes in his take-off stage. Rostow also failed to consider about an economy could reach the fifth stage without going through all the stages of a particular stage. For instance, it has been pointed out that the countries like Canada and Australia entered the stage of mass consumption even before reaching the stage of maturity. This was happening in recent times with the oil-rich countries also. There are limits to the particular country's growth, as there might be instances when a particular country should be regarded as fully developed, even though it might not have reached the standards of Western countries like the USA, because it might have exhausted all its natural resources, manpower, and capital, which set the limit of growth. With respect to the less developed countries, it is felt that Rostow did not take into account crucial factors like unemployment, underemployment, poverty, lack of infrastructure, nature of government, etc. The fifth, the most well-known reaction to theories of modernization is that of its antithesis, the theory of dependency. The dependency theory takes a far more global view and postulates that the difficulties in development are not due solely to the internal working of the country or region in question, but have more to do with the global structures imposed by developed onto the less developed. This is best illustrated by the Andre Gunder Frank conceptualizations of international relations as a chain of metropolis-satellite relationship. Frank suggests that there is an unseen hierarchical structure to world relation. The chain begins with the first metropolis that has no satellite, that is, that has no strong dependency on any other region and continues downward. The next layer consists of still strong metropolis but still require the USA or other well-developed Western societies in some way, until much further down we reach the ultimate satellite, which is dependent on everything above it for existence. Frank argues that these dependence links are both the keys and problems when an inability to develop arises. The sanctions imposed often consciously by the metropolis to which the satellite is dependent strip the freedom of the satellite society to evolve the growth, because all of their output is effectively consumed by the upper society. This theory is actually visible in reality with the situation revolving around aid to the third world, where the interest rates and terms are so harshly imposed that the recipient country will always be at the mercy of the donor. Frank feels that it is the dismantling of these dependency relations that is the solution to the problem of development. Notably, though this is a very socialist perspective, since the release of such restrictions allow for much freer and potentially diverse global system, one which does not fit well with traditional capitalist characteristics. The connection this has with modernization theory is simple. Both have equal merit, even though they are completely opposed in attributes, but The question of which is most suitable is dependent on the belief of the observer. Those brought up and embroiled in a capitalist society and who believe in the benefits of capitalism may be more likely to prefer modernization theory. On the other hand, a neo-Marxist will almost certainly stick with theories of dependency. Clearly, it is not the completely impartial spectator that can truly judge the pros and cons of both the concepts. And finally, it has been pointed out that modernization theory itself has produced nothing truly visible yet. This is not because there has been no development in the past 50 years. There has been evolution related to the both fields and of thought, but the theories themselves are so indistinct and vague. Modernization theory does not paint a very precise picture of what should be happening, or more particularly how it should be occurring. As a motivational aid, this theory is an excellent boost to the drive of the developing society, but it is not the solution, which remains to be seen. Here we want to close our today's lecture. Thank you very much for listening.